When we then hit World War II, unfortunately, it became a little bit more difficult to look after the animals because we're so close to London. There were lots of bombs going off at all times, and the keepers were having to dodge bombs while they were trying to care for their animals. So what Reginald decided was the best course of action was he amalgamated with Paynton Zoo and became known as Chessington and Devon Zoo. And what this did was it allowed him to send our more larger and difficult to look after animals, so that would be our elephants, our lions and our tigers, down to Paynton for the duration of the war to be looked after there, because they were a little bit further from London, so there were a few less bombs being dropped. This allowed some freedom for our keepers and a little bit more flexibility. They weren't having to look after the more difficult animals with bombs being dropped at the same time. Our smokehouse restaurant actually was originally a pub during the times when we were a zoo. We had our own pub on site. Just over there where you can see that gate, that is where we used to have our polar bear enclosure. We had 2 resident polar bears when we originally opened the zoo. Unfortunately, one of them passed away a few years later. But our second polar bear, his name was Jack, and he lived there for the duration of the war. Now, Jack the polar bear was quite happy during everything happening around Chessington, but unfortunately a bomb did explode in a tree above his enclosure during the war, and the bomb blast was so strong that it did blast him against the wall and then flat onto the ground. Now, with all the bombs going off and everything, the keepers were trying to avoid that, and they could not actually get to Jack to check if he was all right, and he did lay there for a few days with the keepers expecting the worst. After 3 days though, he did just stand up and walk it off like nothing ever happened. He didn't have a single injury on him, and he lived a very happy life here at Chessington. Now, the area that we are currently in, it is known as Wild Woods. When it originally opened, it was known as Transylvania, and it opened in 1990 with 2 rides at that point too. The 2 rides at that point were The Vampire, as opposed to Vampire as it's known today, and the second one was Professor Burke's Bubble Works, or as it's known today, The Grappoli. When we went through the retheming of The Vampire to Vampire, we got rid of every single piece of theming within the ride, except for one piece of theming that still remains in our station today, and that is our resident organist. His name is myself. There are quite a few Easter eggs within our shipwreck code that a lot of people love to spot, including the Miss Bubbleworks wash house sign. with reference to bubble works. There's also a boat on the side that says Ramesses Revenge, in reference to our ride that was here known as Ramesses Revenge. Now, when we eventually moved it in here, we decided that the red carousel didn't really fit the Chessington theme as well, so we had this carousel specially designed and built just for Chessington, and it's known as the Adventure Train. Your point is just to our left, the white and blue building over there. That is the station to one of our original rides, and that was?
The Safari Skyway.
Exactly.
Skyway, the monorail.
Exactly. So that was built as one of the original 5 rides when we opened here at Chessington, except our marketing team was quite clever. They built it the year before we opened as a theme park. So in 1986 the Skyway was built. What this allowed the guests to do was they boarded in the station over there. They then went over Mexicana, over Children's Zoo, past Sea Life, around past Lodge entrance, over Trail of the Kings and back into Adventure Point. And while the guests were riding it, they got to see the construction of some of the other rides around park, so it got them excited to come back the following year when we did have more rides opening. The area that we are now driving into is now known as Mexicana. When it originally opened, it was known as Calamity Canyon. It did open with 2 rides, and that was our it did open with 2 rides, and that was our Runaway Mine Train, just located on down that way, and then on the other side we had Rodeo as well. Now the Runaway Mine Train we did refurbish it completely, and we changed it instead to be Scorpion Express as it's known today. Now the man who designed Scorpion Express and the Runaway Mine Train, he's very involved within a lot of Merlin attractions. He has now retired, but he was involved in many of the attractions. Do you know his name?
Is it John Wood?
It is John Wardley. So John Wardley did design quite a few rides here at Chessington, including both the Runaway Mine Train, Scorpion Express.
I think he designed Vampire and
He did do
Dragon's
Vampire and Dragon's Fury, all 3 of the Gruffalos. So at being a part of the Greenbelt, all that means is we are not allowed to build any attractions or buildings or anything that are taller than the tree line. You cannot see Chessington from the main road. That is the rules that we have to follow, similarly at Alton Towers. So in order for us to build our taller attractions, what we have to do is we have to dig down to go up, which was what we've done with Rattlesnake. We've kind of stuck it in a pit so that it can go a little bit taller than if it was at level. Now just behind Crop Drop is the entrance to our Zoofari ride. Now Zoofari holds a record here at Chessington. It was the very first ride that we designed and built completely on our own without a ride company having to come in, and it was completely designed after the safari ride at Animal Kingdom in Disney World, Florida. The music does not always play.
I was just going to ask that.
Yeah,
so at what time does it stop?
The music within the rides will stay on while the engineers are still working on the rides and shutting them down. As they go through and shut them down, the music turns off as well. A lot of people also will always ask us if the animals care about the music or the noise or the rides or anything like that. Our tigers are actually a perfect example of it. They were born at a theme park and zoo in Sweden and then go over here. So they are so familiar with it. It is all they've known their entire life to have rides and stuff happening. And actually during COVID and lockdown and all of that, we did test it to see if any of our animals were affected or acted differently, worked better with training because they weren't guests, anything like that. The only thing that we found was that our gorillas were the only ones to notice that we didn't have guests, and they actually used to miss the guests coming. They liked that interaction. They're a lot happier now that they've got the interaction happening. All of our other animals could not have cared less when the people were not looking at them. So we had Samurai here, and Thorpe Park had a ride known as Peking Heights there. And essentially what happened was when Thorpe Park went through their rebranding to become Thrill Seekers and we went through our rebranding to be family friendly, we decided that Samurai was too intense of a ride to be family friendly and Peking Heights was too boring for the Thrill Seekers. So what Merlin decided to do was they picked up both rides, swapped them over and swapped them back down. So you can see they do have access outside, so it's completely up to them. It's getting a little bit cooler, so they will come out as the time goes on. They are ammo tigers, so they prefer cold to hot, which is a lot of people are always like, no, tigers like heat, they like the jungle. Ours do not, ours are ammo, so they prefer the cold, so they wait for it to get quite cool and then they'll come out and light around. Now before Wild Asia was known as Wild Asia, it was known as Beanoland and was designed after the British comic strip. And just behind Tuk Tuk Treats there is still a cannon with its up box. that was used to launch a life-size Dennis the Menace doll during the shows, which I think is really cool. I would like to know if it works personally. Another attraction that we had within that area was our water balloon fight area. And guests used to be able to go in there and be given water balloons that they could throw at each other, and there were slingshots around the edge as well that they would be able to slingshot each other with the water balloons. Which is a crazy experience to think of, like when you go to a theme park and get handed a water balloon, but you know. Now some fun facts about Mandrill Mayhem for you, because there are quite a few misconceptions about the ride. A lot of people think that it is our tallest attraction here at Chessington. It is actually not. It looks like it is, but it's actually shorter, lower than Vampire. So Vampire's tallest height is 70 feet. Jumanji's tallest is 67 feet, so it is ever so slightly shorter. It's almost half the length of track to Vampire, so Vampire is 2,200 feet. Mandrill Mayhem is 1,247 feet. And then the last one is, a lot of people think it is our fastest roller coaster here at Chessington. Again, this is incorrect.
It's Vampire.
They are exactly the same. So the maximum speeds of both are 45 miles per hour.
Do the staff get to go on the rides like after
We do that quite frequently, so we do staff rides where our HR team will post out